So I want to get back here with just a thank you today for joining in. Again, it's going to be a little bit of a reboot here while we go. Thank you to the Oxford Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring our event and promoting the educational part of it. There's some implications for business owners, and we'll touch on those today. You can ask questions in the chat area on YouTube during the presentation. I'll do my best to answer them. And then any questions we don't answer live, we'll still respond to later today. My co-owner at the agency, Brenda Comrie, helped prepare all the materials, and she's at home today monitoring YouTube questions and will help respond to those. I see that information, also see the information below the YouTube video. You can click for links to the website for more information, and you can already download the detailed slides for today's presentation there. They have more information on them than the ones we're going to look at online. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channels for future videos and like our Facebook page for updates and news. So thanks for everybody who told me that you couldn't hear the audio on that. We'll get back into more of the meat of the presentation now. Appreciate your patience with that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the overview of the law, what the changes are, how they're going to impact you, and what the timing will be for those changes coming up in the future. So I'll get restarted here again. Thanks for your patience. So first, on the overview of the law, it's going to start for new and renewal policies as of July the 2nd. Your bodily injury limits are going to have some changes that we'll talk about in detail. PIP choice is coming along. It's a big thing we've heard about, giving you options to reduce the current unlimited medical care if you'd like to do that. We're going to have an automatic rollback of PIP premiums. Even if you keep it at unlimited, there's a little bit of a break there. And then if you lower your choice limit to a lower number, you can save even more potentially. The MCCA, Catastrophic Claims Association fee, is being reduced. We'll talk about that. The mini tort limit, now $1,000, is raising to $3,000. And there's going to be a medical fee schedule. We won't talk any more about that today, but that's going to go into effect in July of 2021. And that's going to be a way of allowing the insurance companies to use rates that are related to Medicare rates to control the amount that they pay for any particular medical procedure as part of this. So let's get into bodily injury limits a little bit. Currently your minimum limits are 20, 40, and the new minimum limits are going to be 50,000, 100,000. The state does have a default liability limit of 250, 500, and if you want to have any limit lower than 250, 500 in the future, you'll have to complete a form and request that lower limit for your policy. So the reason that they have a new default limit, because some of the other changes we'll talk about later make it a little more likely that we could be involved in a lawsuit if we're at fault in an accident. But there's some more to come on that later on in the talk today. If you happen to have a combined single limit with bodily injury and property damage together, you'll have to have at least 510,000. If you're less than that, you'd have to sign a form to agree to go lower. And then that mini tort, again, maximum recovery amount has been increased from 1,000 to 3,000. So that's a case where if another driver's at fault in your accident and you have to still pay your deductible, you can claim amounts from that other person up to $3,000 for your deductible. Most people might have 500 or 1,000, but you could go recover those costs from them still. So again, policyholders, everybody in the state, everybody who has a policy is going to have to fill out a form to select your bodily injury limits. That's going to be coming with the renewal of your policy on or after July the 2nd. And we know some people already have had them sent out from the various carriers. So you'll probably be receiving those within 60 to 90 days ahead of your renewal. So that's what's going to happen with bodily injury. All right, PIP choice. This is the one that everybody wants to know about. Again, currently we have unlimited benefits. So if we're injured in an accident, we're going to get all the things that PIP covers in Michigan. And what those are the allowable medical expenses. That's what you think happens if you go to the hospital with an injury. You have funeral and burial expenses, work loss for a 3-year limit, replacement services, if you have to have someone do services for you because you can't do them anymore, and then survivor benefits with a 3-year limit. So the choice, the PIP choice is going to let you keep unlimited. If you do that, you're going to get a 10% PIP reduction. That's an automatic rollback. But if you note the slide, that's based on the May 1st, 2019 rate. So it's not, you can't look at your policy on the PIP line and say it's 10% of what's there today. It's a little bit removed from where you were. Could you look at your PIP line and say, well, this car, I pay $200 a year for PIP. Can I expect to get about 10% back? We'll see how everything comes in, but that might be a good gauge as to the rollback you might get if you keep unlimited. So your other options are $500,000, $250,000, and with $250,000, if you have qualified health coverage, like a company plan that will pay for medical care after an auto accident, and you have a deductible of $6,000 or less per person, then you could take yourself off of the policy totally and not have any coverage through your auto policy. You'd have to get a letter from your health carrier, and they're all getting prepared to send these letters out. I've seen an example from HAP so far, for example. You'd have to get a letter from your health carrier that says, yes, this is a qualified plan. Yes, the deductible is less than $6,000 per individual, and these are the actual names of the people on the policy who are covered by this plan. So that's some information you're going to need to get if you do want to totally exclude yourself from the coverage. You can have a $50,000 limit if you're enrolled in Medicaid on there, and then there's also at the bottom a Medicare opt-out. And the Medicare opt-out, what that does, if you have Part A and B, you can rely totally on Parts A and B. What you need to remember, though, is there are some things that may not be covered by your health plan or your Medicare that are covered by PIP, and those are some of those attendant care, work loss benefits, replacement services, longer-term care kind of items. So there's going to be a way to get some of those back, but if you go away from unlimited, you need to think about how much coverage you have for some of those other things that come along with PIP, in addition to just being taken care of in the hospital. So at the bottom of the page here, you can see I have a note that it is not the entire vehicle premium on which you're going to get a savings. So the way this is designed is if you choose the lower level of PIP, say $500,000 for example, you're going to get a reduction on your PIP premium of 20% based on those rates from July or from May of 2019. So you'll have to look carefully at your policy to see how much benefit you're going to get from making a choice other than unlimited. And again, the policyholder, right now the way the law is written, the policyholder will have to make this selection on a form at each renewal. And if no choice is made, if you don't submit your form, it's going to revert back to the unlimited coverage. So you could have a situation where you forget to send in your form, all of a sudden your premium goes up a lot. You're going to call your agent, me, and say, why did that happen? We'll take a look. Probably because a form wasn't submitted for that renewal. So there's extra work for all of us on our renewals that's written into the law. So let's talk about commercial auto for a minute. So those of you business owners out there, bodily injury limits, your default limit again will be $250,000, $500,000. Most businesses have $500,000 or $1 million already. If you're a sole proprietor, you're going to have a lot more options, similar to those that are on the personal PIP choice that we've already talked about. So PIP limits for commercial policies, unlimited, $500,000 or $250,000. I'm going to recommend to all my customers that you keep unlimited on your commercial policy because passengers and family members, non-employees who aren't covered by workers' compensation might be riding in your vehicle, and that's where they're going to get their medical coverage. So if you have a limit of $500,000 and $250,000 and somebody's badly hurt, could result in a lawsuit against your business. So be careful about that when we can talk about it. MCCA fees will also be reduced for your commercial vehicles, and the mini tort change will still be in effect. That will rise to $3,000. So again, if you're a sole proprietor, it's going to be different than if you're a corporation or an LLC, and good idea to keep the higher limits, I think, on the commercial auto policies. So trade-offs and risks. What's going to happen here with the law? So bodily injury limits. Lawsuits to recover medical costs from at-fault drivers are more likely to happen. So, for example, if we're in an accident and I'm the driver who's hurt, unfortunately, you're the driver who is at fault. If I have chosen a limit of $250,000 for myself, but my injuries and related costs go well over $250,000, I can now look to sue to recover those amounts from you and your policy. Today, everyone has the unlimited medical care, unlimited PIP, and so it's much less likely that I would need to sue you to try to recover. So it's important that you have adequate bodily injury limits to take care of that situation. $250,000, $500,000, again, the state increased the recommended or the default limit to that for a reason, but you may want to look at having more than that. You may want to have an umbrella in place for your family if any one of your family, spouse, children are involved and at fault in an accident. So for your PIP limits, if you choose a lower limit, is your health plan adequate? You're going to have deductibles with your health plan. If you're badly hurt, you may not have the same health plan after that. So it's going to be a different world. So do you also have adequate long-term care coverage? So if you reduce your PIP limit, you're not going to have as much there to pay for long-term care. What would be your plan to cover those expenses if something happens? And then the order of priority. So PIP now only applies to named insureds and resident relatives. In the future, that's the way it'll be. Right now, the registrant or owner of the vehicle can also get pulled in. So here's a situation that's going to be really important. If you have an adult child who is living outside of your house, who is working, let's say that you have a 25-year-old son who lives in Kalamazoo, started his job, graduated from college, living there permanently, but you're helping that son out with a car. The car is titled to you, it's on your policy, but he's driving it and keeping it in Kalamazoo. If there's an accident and he's hurt, today, before this law goes into place, he can collect his PIP benefits from your policy because that's where the car is insured. After the law takes effect on July the 2nd, he will not be able to collect that from your policy any longer. So he's going to need to have his own policy that gives him liability and PIP when he's driving. So that's a huge change. This also can affect unrelated individuals who are in a long-term relationship, just not married. There's not going to be automatic coverage anymore. You need to make sure that they're listed on the policy properly, or that each person is listed on the policy properly. So there's some very big risks that come along with the law that you need to consider before you make your choices. So the timing of this, when will I have to make choices? It'll be prior to your next renewal on or after July the 2nd. So again, if your policy renews on June the 30th, nothing's going to happen to you right away. You might still want to look at your bodily injury limits because other people are making changes around you. But the next renewal after July 2nd, the forms are going to be required for the choices. Some companies we know of are sending those forms to you in a packet 60 to 90 days before the renewal. There's one company we know of who's not going to be sending any forms. You'd have to make the choice yourself. So it's important to know that that timing and to be ready to get involved and take a further look at your policy for that renewal. So you can change before your next renewal. My auto policy renews on August the 15th. So typically I would wait, and my change, if I wanted to make one, would happen then. But I am able, if I contact my agent, to make a change anytime after July 2nd. So for people who might have an annual policy that just renewed here in April, you don't necessarily have to wait until April of 2021 to make those changes. You could go ahead and get those done a little bit earlier than that. Okay, so that is the summary of what we were going to be going over today. Again, there's a lot more detail at our website. If you follow the link in the YouTube video, you can see that. So I wanted just to do a quick check and see if we have any questions with that. I see some folks saying that we don't have audio. I'm just going to take a look and see if we have any other questions right now. Okay, don't see any out there today. I've got a couple of other ones that are some scenarios that might be important coming up, so I want to cover a couple of those. So we talked about providing a car to your child if we do it. Another thing that's changing is how out-of-state people are covered on your policy. So if a family member is visiting from out of state during the holidays, the family member is injured in an accident and incurs $100,000 worth of medical expenses, where is this covered in Michigan? It's not covered on a Michigan policy. That person would have to look back to their own health care, possibly their own auto policy from another state to do it. So out-of-state residents won't be able to collect under Michigan PIP in the future. And then there are some, there's a question, if you live in a city and don't have a policy, you don't have a car, so you don't have an auto policy, do you get coverage from the vehicle owner's policy if you drive their car? We talked about that. Well, the answer is no, because you're not a resident relative with that person. So you would have to have your own liability and PIP policy. There are standalone policies for people who don't own a car that you can get, and you can go ahead and add in some liability and PIP coverage for yourself, especially if you're going to be driving a car, a rental car, or a friend's car on a periodic basis. So those, last one I have here, another scenario. 75-year-old has chosen to opt out of PIP coverage because he's covered by Medicare. What can the 75-year-old claim from his or her own personal auto policy? And the answer is, it wouldn't be able to claim anything from the auto policy because he opted out of the coverage and relied on Medicare. So he'd have to totally rely on Medicare, wouldn't get any coverage from his auto policy. So I see a couple of questions coming in. So see one, if your renewal is before July 2nd, do you suggest calling and changing after July 2nd versus waiting? You can't actually officially make the change until July the 2nd. You can talk to your agent before then about it if you want to. So we may not know all of the numbers yet and what's going to happen to your policy. We may know more of those after your renewal's issued, maybe 30 days before July 2nd, but we can talk to you about making those changes prior to your renewal date. So question here, don't a lot of health insurance policies force the employee to take auto coverage as primary in an accident and health coverage as secondary? Yes, that's true. Thank you, Neil. And that's going to remain the case. So there will still be primary and secondary options available in the future as they are today. The key thing to reduce your coverage, though, is to get that letter from your health insurer that says, one, it's a qualified plan, that the deductible per person is $6,000 or less, and it has to list the names of the people who are covered if you want to opt out. And then here's one, if we have an adult child living with you but driving a car the parent owns, are they covered? In that case, Kevin, thanks for your question. Yes, they are a resident relative of yours, a child. So resident relatives are included in the coverage on the policy. So that would be okay. It's just if they become a non-resident, after college, they've changed their permanent address to move away. States told us they're going to look very close at cases, or companies as well. If you have an adult child who doesn't live with you but still has their permanent address there might still be a lot of questions about where they really live if an accident happens and there's a large claim out there. So if they're not a resident any longer, the best idea is to get them their own policy. Okay, so I think that those are all the questions that I can see right now. I want to thank everybody for participating. We'll clean up the video when we post it so that there's not so much dead sound at the beginning. Thanks everybody for letting me know that. Really do appreciate your time. If you have some more questions, please post them there, and Brenda and I will put an answer out later on today. We're going to put a replay of this video on Facebook, on YouTube, and on our website, so you can check for those there as well. Just like to thank you very much for your time and hope you have a great day. Thanks very much.